New this morning, Donald Trump hosted a party at Mar-a-Lago last night. And that's not the news. The news is that the party was celebrating his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The guest list included several key players in those efforts, like Rudy Giuliani and Michael Flynn. Italy's conservative Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was also there. They all gathered to celebrate John Eastman, who advised Trump in 2020 that Vice President Mike Pence had the power to unilaterally discard official electoral votes during the congressional certification process. In a video posted online, apparently taken from the audience, Trump sang Eastman's praises, insisting Eastman was, quote, right the whole time. Tomorrow will mark 4 years since Trump's conspiracy led thousands of pro-Trump extremists to storm the United States Capitol. Fortunately for Trump, Vice President Kamala Harris doesn't share his value set. Tomorrow, she will preside over the certification of Donald Trump's victory. Harris will protect the tradition of peaceful transfers of power as Donald Trump celebrates efforts to destroy it. Joining us now is NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard in West Palm Beach, Florida. Also with us is Boston Globe columnist and co-host of the Sisters-in-Law podcast, Kimberly Atkins-Storr.
Vaughn, welcome to you, both of you this morning. But Vaughn, give us a sense of this room. The audaciousness of it, just the in-your-face MFer, you know? We're going to celebrate the overturning 4 years later of trying to overturn an election. You have, Trump himself saying, I'm a big fan of John Eastman. He was right. He happened to be right. That's why they changed the law, and nobody wants to talk about that. They said he's not allowed to do it. He's not allowed to do it. And they convinced him he's not allowed to do it. Our vice president, then right after the election, they changed the laws so he can't do it. Now, what he's referring to is the Electoral Count Act, which Congress did change to basically shore up the ambiguities in the 1887 law that Eastman exploited, that he used against the country. So what was the sense in this room? What was the purpose of this gathering? Is just an in-your-face moment, or just a tale of things to come?
Right. Let's be very clear. It was no coincidence that this event, in which he welcomed not only John Eastman, but Michael Flynn, Jeffrey Clark, the man who had urged the DOJ to put out false statements about the 2020 election and who Donald Trump considered to make its acting attorney general before January 6th. They were up on stage. Rudy Giuliani was up on stage. Peter Navarro, who, of course, served 4 months in prison for contempt of Congress by not complying with the subpoena from the January 6th Select Committee. He was there up on stage, and they were all watching a film that was a documentary on the lawyer John Eastman, who you are talking about, who on January 5th, the anniversary being today, and January 6th, was urging then President Trump to pressure Vice President Pence to reject the electoral college votes coming from certain states, contending that he legally had the right to do so. And last night, while they were watching that documentary, it was happening in conjunction with Donald Trump welcoming Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who sat right next to Donald Trump, between Trump and Marco Rubio, as they watched that film about John Eastman play out. There was a lot taking place, and to be brutally honest with you, guys, we did not know that this event was taking place in real time, and was watching these videos on social media trickle out as Donald Trump, just a day before the Kamala Harris is set to certify and oversee the counting of the Electoral College votes to make him the next president. He, here in Mar-a-Lago at Palm Beach, just across the water from where we're standing, welcoming those individuals who tried to help him overturn the 2020 election, being welcomed back to his estate here in Florida.
So, Kim, just to underscore what we just heard from Vaughn there, no pool camera, no editorial allowed into Mar-a-Lago for the events, no readouts provided. It's a little bit like they're telling on themselves, like they know that what they are doing doesn't pass the smell test. So let me read you what Donald Trump had to say as he praised John Eastman. He said, "I'm a big fan of John Eastman. He was right. He happened to be right. That's why they changed the law, and nobody wants to talk about that. They said he's not allowed to do it. He's not allowed to do it. And they convinced him he's not allowed to do it. Our vice president. Then right after the election, they changed the law so he can't do it." So Just to be clear, a little fact check on that. I think what Trump is referring to is the Electoral Count Act. It reforms Congress adopted as part of a spending package in 2022. They did not change the law because they believed it allowed the VP to discard electoral votes, but instead to remove ambiguities from the original law. Part of this is to sow confusion and doubt. Kimberly.
That's absolutely right. I mean, there are so many things wrong with what happened last night, but one of them, yes, is his incorrect characterization about what the Electoral Count Reform Act did. What it did was make clear that the job of the vice president, that we will see Vice President Kamala Harris carry out tomorrow, is mandatory. It is not discretionary. The vice president does not and never had the ability to upend the will of the people. But that is going to be lost on the folks like that were in the crowd last night. Let's remember, John Eastman was disbarred. As you pointed out, Peter Navarro served time in jail. Rudy Giuliani disbarred and is now trying to fight payment for after defaming election workers in a way that upended their lives. These are not patriots. And I think that it is absolutely unconscionable for a foreign leader to have been a part of that. There's only one president at a time, so she had no business there doing that, and certainly the lack of transparency is precisely why things like this should not happen. But we are seeing now Donald Trump fully believes that he and everyone around him is above the law.
Let's just put a finer point on it. This is sickening.
Yeah.
This is sickening. I am sick. Peter Navarro, Jeffrey Clark, the people that went to the Capitol to take up arms against the United States government because the the president of the United States at the time lied to them, because that's what happened. Those people are not patriots. What Donald Trump did last night is a disgrace to this country. It is a disgrace to the Constitution. And to Alicia's point, the fact that they didn't tell anyone about it lets you know that they knew what they were doing was untoward. So they didn't want to put a spotlight on it, but they wanted to do it anyway. Vaughn, how in this next iteration of what folks have been calling Trump 2.0, how can people hold this administration accountable? Because I do think it is not a small thing. It wasn't just some party. Like, they're letting you know where their values are, what they think, and frankly, that if the president-elect was not successful in this last election, that they would have done it again.
I think that when you look at the last 4 years in leading up to this point, there have been people like John Eastman and Jeffrey Clark. They have sort of been, I guess, kept at a distance to a certain degree. Michael Flynn as well. There have been, they've definitely remained allies. They've visited Mar-a-Lago here and there. But last night, just 2 weeks before January 20th was Inauguration Day, I think was a clear indicator and an affirmation that Donald Trump will defend those who are dutifully loyal to him. This is coming at a time in which he has said that he would look at the cases of those individuals who attacked the Capitol 4 years ago. There have been more than 1,100 convictions of individuals who were a part of that mob that descended onto the Capitol. And I think an important part of this is also the parallel between welcoming individuals like Michael Flynn, who is a conspiracy theorist and was in an Oval Office meeting where he allegedly, before January 6th, had conversations with Donald Trump about potentially implementing martial law and seizing voting machines. But that event happening in parallel to a top European leader in the Italian prime minister, and merging those two events, I think is an indication of Donald Trump's style of leadership. This is, Mar-a-Lago, a place where not only Justin Trudeau has flown to, but Viktor Orban, the new the new NATO Secretary General. This is a time in which everybody is cognizant of the importance of having a close relationship with Donald Trump, and Trump, to his part, with having the Italian conservative right-wing Giorgia Meloni present, she could be very much a key ally in Europe for him, along with Viktor Orban, as negotiations and conversations take place about additional U.S. aid to Ukraine, but also the trade wars that Donald Trump has threatened actions to take against Europe. So I think that this is all very much coming to a head simultaneously in ways that I think are very representative of how the first Trump administration operated, and so far how it appears the second Trump administration will look here in 2025.
Well, the reality, at least for me, goes to the heart of what Simone said. Folks, the slime you feel right now when you hear this story, that thing in your gut that goes, ugh, this doesn't seem right. To Kimberly's point, we only have one president at a time. Trump doesn't give a crap about that. He's the man. Doesn't matter. And so when you have this environment that's being played out in front of you, understand a couple of things, Kimberly. One, I think, is that Donald Trump at this point is going to relitigate 2020. So y'all need to buckle down for that. Vaughn, get your pad ready, baby, because you'll be writing about 2020 as if it happened yesterday. Because from where he's sitting, he wants to prove that that election was stolen. That's why he's leveling up this misfit, this menagerie of misfits. He didn't want them around him because he had no use for them then, because he didn't know if he'd get back in the White House. Now he's back, and they're back. And it goes to the heart of something that came out of the January 6th Election Committee report, in which at a January 4th meeting in the Oval Office, Eastman himself acknowledged that any variation of his proposal, whether rejecting electoral votes outright or delaying certification to send them back to the states, would violate several provisions of the Electoral Count Act. That's why the Congress reformed the act, because they knew what they were doing was a violation of the 1887 law, and they were doing it anyway. So, Kimberly, how do reporters tell this story? Because I don't want to hear, I almost said a bad word. All right, Kyle, be good. I don't want to hear crap coming out of news agencies as if this is new. This is not new.
Or as if this is normal.
Or as if this is normal. I mean, this event in Mar-a-Lago was an abomination. It shouldn't have happened, and it wouldn't have happened. And how do we know that? Because they didn't want to tell anybody about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, that's just my thought.
Well, frankly, journalists and news organization they need to have stones, and they need to stand up to this, because not only does it need to be stated as plainly as you just did, but it has to be stated in the face of the intimidation that we have already seen at news organizations.
Yes.
We have seen Donald Trump and his acolytes trying to use the courts to silence news organizations, and it has been successful in some really troubling cases. What we need is to speak truth to power, to shine a light as clearly as possible, and to explain what it means. I'm really tired of the coverage that says Donald Trump said this, or Donald Trump hinted at this, or no. We need to say why this is important to the American people. Every institution that is being destroyed, every norm that is being violated, every law that is being broken as we see it in real time, and every intention that when he states an intention to break more laws, that needs to be stated plainly too. So journalists have a big job to do. They have not, many of them, some of them have.
Yeah.
But many of them have been failing at that job, and that is no longer acceptable.